There is a small island in the Persian Gulf. 5 miles long. Almost nothing on it. No city. No civilians worth speaking of. No natural beauty. No history that the world has chosen to remember. Just pipelines. And oil terminals. And the 85 to 95% of all Iranian crude oil exports that flow through them every single year. $46 billion in annual oil revenue. Almost all of it moving through one tiny island. Kharg Island. The financial heartbeat of the Iranian regime. Right now, U.S. Marines are sailing toward it. Not one unit. 2. The 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, already en route from Okinawa, Japan, approximately 2,000 Marines. And now, the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, deploying from the U.S. West Coast aboard the USS Boxer and 2 additional amphibious warships, another 2,500 Marines. Together. Over 4,000 U.S. Marines. Converging on the Persian Gulf. With amphibious assault ships, attack helicopters, F-35B fighter jets, artillery, and armored vehicles. All of them pointed toward a 5-mile island that holds the economic key to Iran's survival. The United States has not confirmed what it intends to do. But what it is sending, and where it is sending it, tells a story that is very hard to misread. In the next 15 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why Kharg Island matters, the 3 scenarios the U.S. is weighing, the risks attached to each one, and what this deployment means for Iran's regime, and for this war. Kharg Island is not impressive to look at. It is a small, largely barren outcrop in the northwestern Persian Gulf, sitting about 20 miles off the Iranian coast in the province of Bushehr. By almost any measure, size, population, natural resources, physical geography, it should be an unremarkable footnote. But geography and infrastructure combine to make it something else entirely. Kharg Island economic statistics. Size, approximately 5 miles end to end. Function, Iran's primary crude oil export terminal. Share of Iran's crude oil exports, 85% to 95%, according to CBS News. Iran's annual oil revenue, 2024 figures approximately $46 billion, per the Tehran Times. Revenue at risk if Kharg is lost, up to $43.7 billion per year. Iran holds approximately 10% of the world's proven oil reserves. Oil is not just one part of Iran's economy. It is the foundation that funds the government, the military, the nuclear program, the proxy network across Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and Gaza, everything the Iranian regime uses to project power and maintain its grip on the country. And the vast majority of the money that oil generates flows through one processing and export facility on one small island. Kharg Island's terminal infrastructure represents decades of investment. The loading jetties, the pipeline connections, the storage tanks, the pumping stations, none of it was built quickly or cheaply, and none of it can be replaced quickly or cheaply. When the United States struck Kharg Island earlier in this conflict, it targeted and destroyed the island's military infrastructure. According to President Trump, that strike totally obliterated every military target on the island. Iranian soldiers, military equipment, command and communications infrastructure, gone. But the oil terminals and pipelines were spared. Iran's oil exports are still running. The money is still flowing. And that is precisely what the 2 Marine Expeditionary Units now converging on the Persian Gulf are being positioned to change. The reconnaissance picture developing around Kharg Island is itself a telling signal. The U.S. Navy has been deploying the MQ-4C Triton, a large, high-altitude surveillance drone designed for persistent maritime reconnaissance, over the Persian Gulf. On March 20, one of these Tritons was observed orbiting directly over the largest oil terminal on Kharg Island. The Triton is not an attack drone. It does not carry weapons. It carries sensors, cameras, radar, signals intelligence collection equipment. It is the kind of asset you deploy when you are building the intelligence picture you need before you act. Someone is watching Kharg Island very carefully. And that someone is flying American colors. The arrival of 2 Marine expeditionary units in the Persian Gulf, with their amphibious assault ships, attack helicopters, F-35B fighters, artillery, and armored vehicles, creates 3 distinct operational options for the United States. Each carries different consequences, different risks, and different messages to Iran and to the world. Let us work through all 3. The first and least kinetically escalatory option is a naval blockade of Kharg Island, using the arriving amphibious ready groups to prevent merchant tankers from docking at the island's oil terminals. The strategic logic is elegant. Iran has been choking off the Strait of Hormuz to apply economic pressure on the United States and its allies. A naval blockade of Kharg Island answers that pressure directly. Shutting off the revenue stream that sustains Iran's ability to fight this war, without the political and military complexity of putting U.S. troops on Iranian-controlled territory. As the war zone noted in its analysis, the U.S. would essentially be giving Iran a measured dose of its own medicine, blocking commerce at a critical maritime choke point, applying financial pressure, but without the direct violence of Iran's drone and fast boat attacks on merchant shipping. The challenge is significant, however. A naval blockade requires ships to remain stationary in a defined area for extended periods. Stationary ships, in a region where Iran retains coastal missile launch sites, drone capability, and fast boat squadrons, are exposed targets. The Persian Gulf is not open ocean, it is a confined body of water with Iran's entire southwestern coastline running along one side of it. The A-10 Warthog attack aircraft and Apache helicopters that the U.S. has deployed to the region can provide air cover against fast boats and visible coastal threats. But as Iran has demonstrated throughout this conflict, it retains the ability to strike stationary targets with ballistic missiles, even after significant degradation of its military infrastructure. A blockade is possible. It is less risky than a ground assault. But it is far from risk-free. The second option, and the one that has attracted the most public attention, is a direct ground assault on Kharg Island, followed by a U.S. military occupation of the territory. The numbers are already moving into position to support this kind of operation. Former U.S. Central Command Commander General Joseph Votel assessed that the United States would likely need between 800 and 1,000 Marines to push Iran's remaining forces off Kharg Island. The Sunday Times suggested the figure could be higher, potentially requiring the full strength of 1 MU and possibly more, depending on how many Iranian military personnel survived the earlier American strikes on the island's military infrastructure. With over 4,000 Marines potentially converging on the Persian Gulf, the force size is not the limiting factor. The terrain itself does not favor the defenders. Kharg Island is small, relatively flat, and isolated from Iranian mainland reinforcement by 20 miles of open water. Its military defenses were already totally obliterated in the earlier U.S. strikes, according to President Trump. Whatever garrison remains is likely severely degraded in both numbers and capability. Senator Lindsey Graham publicly called for exactly this kind of operation, invoking the spirit of Iwo Jima when speaking to Fox News Sunday. Keep it up for a few more weeks, take Kharg Island where all of the resources they have to produce oil, control that island, let this regime die on a vine, Graham declared. CBS News reported on March 20 that Pentagon officials have already drawn up detailed plans for deploying U.S. ground forces into Iran. The plans exist. The forces are approaching. The decision has not been announced, but the infrastructure for making it is in place. Former CENTCOM Commander Votel articulated the dual message a ground operation would send, telling the war zone, the occupation of Kharg Island would tell Iran directly that U.S. forces are on its territory, a message of absolute resolve. And it would simultaneously communicate to the broader international energy community that America is actively safeguarding the infrastructure through which global oil supplies flow. The risk of occupation, however, mirrors the risk of blockade, but at greater intensity. U.S. Marines on Kharg Island become a stationary target located approximately 20 miles from the Iranian coast. Iran's remaining ballistic missile capability, diminished but not eliminated, could reach the island. Every resupply vessel sent to the occupied island must run the same gauntlet of drones, fast boats, and coastal missiles that threatens the blockade scenario. And there is an additional complication unique to occupation. Iran's oil pipelines run directly underneath and through the island. Any Iranian missile strike aimed at dislodging U.S. Marines from Kharg Island would risk destroying the very infrastructure that, depending on how the United States wants to use the island as a bargaining chip, it may want to keep intact. That creates a deterrent of its own. But deterrence is only as reliable as the rationality of the decision-maker it is meant to constrain. The third option requires no Marines at all. Or at least, no Marines on the ground. The United States could simply destroy Kharg Island's oil terminals and pipeline infrastructure entirely using air power. The same B-1 bombers that carried GBU-72 bunker-buster bombs against Iran's Hormuz coast missile sites could be redirected at Kharg Island's processing facilities. The damage would be catastrophic and, critically, would take years to repair, even if Iran had the financial resources and technical capacity to attempt a rebuild. According to CNBC, destroying Kharg Island's oil terminal and pipeline network would eliminate approximately 1.5 million barrels per day in Iranian crude oil exports. The financial impact would blow a hole of roughly $43 billion per year in Iran's economy, at a moment when the regime is already under extraordinary financial strain from the broader conflict. And yet, the United States has not done this. And the reason it has not done this tells you a great deal about the strategic calculation being made in Washington. China purchases approximately 80% of Iran's exported oil. Destroying Kharg Island's export infrastructure does not just hurt Iran, it directly impacts China's energy supply at a moment when US-China tensions are already running extremely high. Beyond China, destroying the infrastructure permanently removes it as a bargaining chip. If the United States seizes or blockades Kharg Island, it has something to trade: the restoration of Iran's oil exports in exchange for Iranian concessions on the Strait of Hormuz, on its weapons programs, on any number of strategic demands. Destroy the infrastructure and that leverage disappears in the smoke of burning oil terminals. There is also the risk of Iranian retaliation against its Gulf neighbors' energy infrastructure. A threat that Iran's government speaker Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf made explicitly, warning that any strike on Iranian power and energy infrastructure would result in the destruction of energy facilities across the entire region. For these reasons, outright destruction appears to be the option the United States is least likely to pursue, despite having the capability to execute it at any time. The real choice appears to be between the blockade and the ground assault. If the military deployments toward Kharg Island tell a clear story, the political signals coming from Washington are considerably harder to read. On March 19, President Trump told reporters in the Oval Office that he was not putting troops anywhere. Then, almost immediately, he added, "If I were, I certainly wouldn't tell you." That is not a denial of the option. That is a performance of misdirection that specifically leaves the option open while denying it publicly. On March 20, Trump declared there would be no ceasefire with Iran, stating that you do not negotiate a ceasefire when you are, in his words, literally obliterating the other side. One day later, Trump was suggesting he was looking to wind down Operation Epic Fury. And on March 23, reports emerged that the United States and Iran had held preliminary talks toward what was described as a complete and total resolution of hostilities. Trump indicated he would hold off on threatening Iran's power stations for 5 days based on those talks. Iran's parliament speaker called the entire report fake news, claiming the talks never happened and accusing the United States of fabricating the story to manipulate oil prices. What is the truth? The honest answer is that it is genuinely unclear, and that ambiguity may itself be deliberate. Keeping Iran uncertain about whether negotiations are real, whether a ground operation is imminent, whether the next strike will target power plants or oil terminals, this uncertainty is itself a form of pressure. What is not ambiguous is this: the ships are sailing. The Marines are aboard. The Triton reconnaissance drone is circling Kharg Island. The A-10 Warthogs and Apache helicopters are in position in the Strait of Hormuz. Whatever the diplomatic signals say, the military deployment is proceeding. And when over 4,000 Marines arrive in the Persian Gulf with amphibious assault capability, the options available to the President of the United States change in a very concrete way. Let me put the complete picture together. Kharg Island processes 85 to 95% of Iran's crude oil exports, representing up to $43.7 billion of annual revenue that funds the Iranian regime's military, its proxies, and its ability to sustain this conflict. The United States has already destroyed every military target on the island. The oil infrastructure was deliberately spared, preserved as leverage, as a bargaining chip, or as a future target if diplomacy fails. 2 Marine Expeditionary Units, over 4,000 Marines total, are now converging on the Persian Gulf aboard amphibious assault ships equipped with attack helicopters, F-35B fighters, artillery, and armored vehicles. Reconnaissance drones are orbiting the island's oil terminals. Pentagon officials have drafted detailed ground operation plans. And the President of the United States has declined to deny that troops might be deployed, while declining to confirm that they will be. 3 options remain on the table: naval blockade, ground assault and occupation, or infrastructure destruction. The third appears least likely. The first 2 are both supported by the forces now approaching. Iran's regime has survived sanctions. It has survived previous military strikes. It has survived diplomatic isolation. What it almost certainly cannot survive is the permanent loss of the single island through which almost all of its oil revenue flows. The Marines are coming. The question is what order they receive when they arrive. 3 questions. Drop your answer in the comments. A. The U.S. has over 4,000 Marines heading toward Kharg Island. Do you think Trump will order a ground assault and occupation, or will Washington stop at a naval blockade to avoid the political cost of boots on Iranian soil? B. Former CENTCOM Commander Votel says 800 to 1,000 Marines could take the island. The Sunday Times says the 31st MU's full 2,000 plus may not be enough to hold it. Who is right, and does the U.S. have enough force committed to both take and hold Kharg Island against Iranian missile and drone retaliation? C. Trump is sending mixed signals: no ceasefire one day, winding down the next, possible talks the day after. Is this deliberate strategic ambiguity designed to keep Iran off balance, or is Washington genuinely divided about what to do next? A, B, or C? Drop it below right now. If this gave you a clear picture of what the world is about to watch unfold, share it with one person who needs to understand what Kharg Island means. Subscribe. Hit the notification bell. And we will see you in the next one.